So with that, I want to introduce Brian from Expert Dojo. So Expert Dojo is an incubator accelerator program in Southern California. Brian's worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs. And then the panel, Stacy Epstein, Alex Fielding, and Ari Gossman, they'll do quick intros themselves. Let's give them a warm welcome.
Sure. And we begin. So we'll start off with just quick introductions of who we are, then we'll kick into some questions, hopefully give you as much feedback as we possibly can within 20 minutes. I'll start off. Expert Dojo, we're an international accelerator in Southern California. We're based in Santa Monica and Silicon Beach in about 8,000 square feet. We invest in about 30 to 50 companies every single year. Our check sizes are between $50,000 and $100,000. Our preferred country is Israel, but we also invest in South Korea, we invest in Canada, we invest in Mexico, we invest in Brazil, and we just did an investment in Africa as well. I'll throw in two extra things that I think maybe the panel can jump into as well. I mean, number one, the biggest hack as far as in recent memory for me of somebody with fundraising, and it was one of my companies, and I don't know if I'm proud or ashamed, and I won't say what religion that person converted to, but they converted to the religion on a Saturday morning and ended up in that particular place and found their investor who they knew was going to be there and had to go to that particular place of religion for at least 4 weeks before they built up the relationship. Is it a terrible sacrilegious thing to do, or is it just a really smart founder? I am not the one to judge. I'll also throw in a nightmare story in there as well, which is one to be cautious of. At this precise moment, I have a startup whose investor at seed round is currently suing the startup for what he's calling a malicious destruction of the business, which was really just emotions on either side, but it brings a cautionary tale that when we do fundraise money, we have to be aware that there's pain on either side. There's pain on the founder because you guys want to break through. There's pain on the investor because nobody wants to lose $1 million. And on that nice depressing note, Stacy, you want to go next?
Did he find God? That's what I want to know.
I found a new one.
Really
you find out there's
really
a few different gods
right?
when it comes to fundraising.
Hello, everyone. I'm Stacy Epstein. We're talking about fundraising, so I'll frame my experience in my fundraising experience. So I've been in enterprise software for about 30 years. Was at Oracle in the early days. My first real fundraising experience was I was the first marketer and the CMO at SuccessFactors, and came on after the first round. So I don't even remember. I think we raised 5 rounds on our way to IPO, and worked closely with Lars Dalgaard on pretty much every round as the CMO. Then I went to ServiceMax, was employee 15 and the CMO there. We raised 4 or 5 rounds, and then did an IPO, but GE bought ServiceMax for about $1 billion. Then I left and went and started Zinc, where we raised 2 rounds, and about 6 months ago, we were acquired by ServiceMax. So a lot of rounds and fundraising going as far back as around 2005. So it has definitely changed a lot. And certainly my experience is mostly enterprise, but that's, so I'm at ServiceMax right now, helping Zinc get successful within ServiceMax.
And biggest hack that you've seen in fundraising?
I mean, to me, it's not a hack, and we can spend more time talking about it. But even watching this morning on the open mic, you absolutely have to very quickly explain what you do. And getting to benefits and the problem statement's fine, and it's not a hack, right? It should be the most fundamental thing you do, but I can't tell you how many times. Like just a few weeks ago, one of my relatives was like, I have this great idea, let me tell you about it. And for 10 minutes, I'm like, I still don't really get what you do. Like, I don't want to hear benefits. All I want to hear, just let me understand what you do. And people they go right past it because they're so trying to impress and all these other things. So not a hack, should be core. But that's going to be my big thing today is make sure you explain what you do.
Is that also your cautionary tale? Don't not say what you don't do, or don't just kill people with features.
You know, there's so much more to a great fundraise, and you know, people put a lot into the pitch. The pitch is important, but the pitch is step one. There's still a lot of miles to cover between a great pitch and actually closing an investment, right? So, I mean, there's a lot to do in there, and I think it's fine to you know, great examples and value proposition and anecdotes and all the other things that go into it, but those are meaningless. It's same with the website. You know, how many websites do you go to and you're just like, oh, I don't want to see a video with your customer saying how great it is when I first get to your website because I don't know what you do. And until I have that core fundamental knowledge, nothing else you say, it all goes right over my head because I'm struggling to figure it out. So
Awesome.
that's
Thank
my
you.
big thing.
Alex.
I'm Alex Fielding. I'm the CEO of Ripcord. So to follow up on Stacy's point, we use giant industrial robots to digitize the world's paper. And we take all that stuff, we stick it in the cloud, and we reconnect it to enterprise systems. On the topic today, Ripcord's raised about $80 million so far. We'll probably go out and raise some more capital this year. And across my career, I've raised about $200 million in venture. I don't think anybody gets a trophy for fundraising, right? I mean, it's basically table stakes. I mean, fundraising is what you have to do to be able to support a growing business. And there's a lot of reasons why you go to do venture fundraising versus, you know, seed stage or angel fundraising or friends and family. I mean, traditionally, I think if you're here, you're already well aware of what you want to accomplish. But venture is really about going fast. And I haven't met anybody who's raised venture capital with the intention of going slowly or without the fear that somebody's going to come and overtake them. So I think my number one fundraising hack, which it's not really a hack, is be cognitive of, you know, first of all, good storytelling, right? Make sure that people know what you do. And secondly, timing, because timing is everything. And believe it or not, it's not like there's a fundraising season, but you probably don't want to go out and start raising around between Thanksgiving and Christmas when everybody's away on vacation and skiing and you're going to have trouble scheduling meetings. I think another kind of follow-up hack is just realizing that there are great resources like the Funded, which, you know, I think if you don't have an account on the Funded, go get one. Doesn't cost you anything, gives you good insight into the process. But I think that's also a follow-on to, you know, opportunities are being tracked. And you have to be aware, as related to timing, when you go out and actually pitch and how you build a strategy around fundraising. I mean, if you're going off and meeting with one potential investor, that's kind of like buying, you know, one lottery ticket.
Right, and you've raised $200 million. So when you say go fast, what does that mean? Because I think everybody in their heads, we all want to go fast. But sometimes it's not quite that simple, and sometimes we end up going slow. What are the things that you specifically did for the $200 million that helped you get there by going fast as opposed to other people who didn't?
I think it's actually almost a self-fulfilling prophecy in the sense that if you have to go fast, if you must go fast, and what I mean by that is there's a competitor that's right behind you that's thinking about doing the same thing. There's, you know, a whole market evolving around a specific segment of ideas or technologies, and you either become the first, the best in the space in that new category, you basically create the category, or you own some segment of that technology. You have to do that very, very quickly, or you're going to get overrun by companies that have a lot more resources and a lot more talent, especially than a small startup company, right? So I think the lesson learned there is if you have to go fast, there's also a benefit, which is if you're in venture capital, you want to invest in companies that have to move very quickly. You know, not just based on return profile and what those investors expect, but just the opportunity eroding around it. You know, there's going to be a few winners and there's going to be a lot of losers, and you want to be in the winner category.
I like it. We're going to come back to it. Thanks. Ari.
Yeah.
Ari Roisman, founder and CEO of Glide. Spent the last few years getting into hardware. We've built the camera for the Apple Watch, although we have yet to bring the product to market. We've raised over $50 million. We started off really focused on a high growth communications play. We pioneered instant video messaging or video walkie-talkie, basically push-to-talk video, and then really been through a lot, ups and downs, and happy to be here today and share some of the learnings. I think financing, after you kind of learn the basics and understand the lay of the land, it's really more art than science. And it's driven by people. At the end of the day, people are making decisions whether or not they want to invest in your company. So I think understanding how to get in front of the right people and then establishing rapport and trying to build relationships with the right people, keeping in touch with them, and then it's all about this story. And this story is a constant evolution, and having that evolution of that story informed by learnings about your business, perspectives from others that have been through this before, have relevant experience. There's some initial thoughts.
Beautiful. And look, I know when you raise $50 million, I mean, that road is paved with beautiful bricks, but there's a couple of boulders and weeds in there as well. If you have to think back to something you did that was so horrible that you just woke up in the middle of the night and said, what the hell did I do that for? On the journey.
Are you thinking of something specific?
No, just we all do it, right? I remember, so I'll put it into context. I always remember when I was doing a conference years ago, way before I had an accelerator, I was working with a massive corporation, and they said to me, here's $30,000, and you're going to do it. They were our first sponsor coming in. This is back in the day. And then somebody said, well, you should go up and meet these guys. And I'm going, yeah, I'll go up and meet these guys. I go up and see them. Anyway, I thought the meeting went great. Immediately after the meeting, they asked me to tear up the check, right? So there are moments when we're on a journey, and that journey is so beautiful, and then we just do something which is a great lesson for other people during it, which maybe is a fundraising moment that people can learn from.
Yeah, so early on, before I'd raised any money, I remember sitting down with one of the original partners, I believe, or one of the early partners at Benchmark, Michael Eisenberg, who now has a small Series A fund in Israel, Aleph, I'm sure you're familiar with if you're looking at deals in Israel. And he told me he's seen more companies die of indigestion than starvation, meaning he's seen more companies really go through turmoil through having too much money than those that don't have enough. Especially here in Silicon Valley, and especially when things get frothy and there's a lot of excitement around startups, and then more and more folks that don't really understand venture or understand how these companies go from an idea to becoming a real leader or a pioneer in a new market. You get excited just about, from the outside looking in, it's easy to get excited just about the financing part of this. But Alex, but as Alex mentioned, it's not, for good companies, and I think certainly I strive to be in that bucket. But can't say that every step along the journey we've squarely fallen in that bucket. But good companies really don't look at financing as a strategy. It's really a tactic to fuel the overall strategy of the company. And the best thing you can do is create value somehow without taking other people's money. We look at fundraising as if it's a badge of honor, it's medals. I think it really just makes the stakes a lot higher. It totally takes away your focus from the business, and then it becomes a crutch depending upon the type of business you're trying to build. So you really have to understand specifically what is it that you're trying to build, and then how dependent are you on outside funding? Are there other ways of funding it? There's other sources of capital. But it's really important to understand how venture firms are structured and how they think about deals, and then how taking money from venture can actually really handicap you depending upon what you aspire to do.
And that's your theme for this panel today, is don't focus so much on the fundraising, focus much more on building something incredible, and building something incredible at the right pace, rather than building something fast just for the sake of building something fast. If people see you build something incredible and you're setting at milestones that you're going to hit, and you're hitting those milestones, then the probability of you failing reduces every single day, which means the probability of getting investment increases. Visionary. You want to say something first?
Well, yeah, I think it was a really great question about those moments when you're like, oh, why did I do that? And I mentioned I was part of a lot of rounds of funding as a CMO and working on the pitch deck. But then when I was the CEO was the first time I was actually negotiating the deal with an investor, right? And I found myself all the time in conversations where like half the time I didn't even know what terms they're talking about, and just because I had never had that experience. Now, when you're further along and you're in later stages, you're gonna have a CFO, you're gonna have a general counsel, and I mean, I had a law firm, I had Fenwick, I had a very good law firm, but I think sometimes they just assume that you know, right? And you're on a call and it doesn't occur to them, well, maybe she didn't really know what that term is. And there were times that like the next day I'd be like, I hope I answered that right, but I wasn't. But what was a drag along clause? I don't know. I got to Google it while I'm on the phone, right? How much stock should I leave available for hiring over the until I raise money again? Just things that I'm not stupid. I just had never had those conversations. So my advice is everybody who's doing early stage and hasn't really been the CEO and around, find somebody that you can talk to, right? If you don't have a great lawyer, you don't have a GC or a CFO, find someone that when you hang up, you can call and go, hey, this came up, explain it to me so I know how to answer it, right? And the other is be humble about it. Like, you know, finally I just said, hey guys, I gotta remind you, this is my first time doing this. I don't know how to answer that question. Give me a day and I'll come back to you with my response, right? And so I didn't feel like I had to be like, oh, I know everything about fundraising. Like, you know, it was my first time. And when I finally just said that, I feel like I had a lot more willingness to help me with the nuances here and there that I had never experienced. Then my second thing about going back and looking back at what you do after you raise money. I feel there's always a balance between, you know, every investor wants to know what are you going to use the money for, right? And it's typically some combination of you're fueling innovation or you're fueling growth, right? At SuccessFactors and at ServiceMax, we had product market fit super early and pretty much every round was just pouring fuel on it. Adding salespeople, adding marketing, just literally grow, grow, grow. At Zinc, and by the way, since I didn't say before what we do, even though that's the important thing to say, is so we're a messaging app, but we're focused on field service industries. So guys that drive in white vans and fix things and probably would never use Slack because it's just too much for them. They want it to look like WhatsApp. That's what we do. It took us a while to find product market fit, right? And so in retrospect, I was so used to pouring fuel on it and fueling growth, and I needed more time. And when you've always got that runway ahead of you, like when are you going to raise the next round? I think we could have found even more success if we had just waited. And you feel the pressure, like if I don't hire this many people, then I won't drive this much growth, and then I won't be able to raise the next round. But sometimes you're going to burn that money anyway. So really being thoughtful about where are we in product market fit and finding the right balance between whether you're putting your money into innovation to get to product market fit or are you just pouring fuel on it to grow fast.
That may be one of the best pieces of advice I've heard for a long time because that pressure is intense. By the way, timing people, if you just tell us when we're up, okay? Because otherwise, I'm Irish. We'll talk all day, okay? So if we're still good for time, 12 minutes, beautiful, okay. So I want to go a little bit deeper in because I love that whole focus on whether you go for product market fit and you stay back and you make yours great. I personally have always struggled with lean startup. Actually, let me rephrase it. I've always struggled with the way people have interpreted lean startup, which is let's just build something really fast and get it out there, right? Because you then spend all of the time back wheeling to try and get yourself back in. Build something incredible. And if you haven't built something incredible, focus on that. If you have, focus on growing it. I want to focus on another point, and I don't want to pigeonhole you here, but it's down in Santa Monica, it's a really interesting time. If you'd said to me 4 or 5 years ago, there were very few female LPs, there were hardly any female GPs. Most of the females in funds were associates, and there were not a massive amount of female entrepreneurs breaking through. If I look at this year, we have a huge parity. We did an event last week and there were at least 80 female LPs and GPs, which I think we all know is being driven by the boardroom, which is great news. And our cohort this year is a larger amount of female entrepreneurs than male entrepreneurs, but just because they're better, not because we care. right? Can you just talk a little bit as to how you see females in fundraising and how things are changing maybe at the moment? Am I being too optimistic about how things are right now?
No, I'm super optimistic too. And as I said, I worked at Oracle in 1991, and it was like there were no women in leader. There was like one female leader that anybody had to look up to. Like in 30 years, it's been a huge dramatic shift. But I definitely think in the last 5 years, it's really, really changed. And I think part of it is just part of the conversation all the time, especially in the Valley, right? Everybody wants a female on the board. Everybody wants a female on their leadership team. And that's a great thing. I mean, I think it's really helped for a little bit more equality and a little bit more opportunities for women. I mean, I've been used to being the only woman in the boardroom for most of my career. And I had 2 female board members at Zinc, and I did not make an effort to do that. Like, it happened to be, we went to GE Ventures. It was a great corporate investor, and the person that kind of covered our space was a female. We went to Hearst Ventures, and the person she found us was a female. It was like, my board was me and 2 females, and Jason Green from Emergence. We used to tease him all the time for being the only guy on the board. That wouldn't have happened. I went to a conference a few months back put on by Founders Fund and Shasta, and there were more women. It was mostly like, the younger millennial founders and CEOs it was Dorm Room Fund actually and Founders Fund. And I was so inspired. I was like, this is incredible. Like, there's more women here than men. This is kind of the future of where it's going. So I feel super optimistic. There's still certainly challenges, but I think that there's a lot more equality for gender and every type of diversity. So I am super optimistic like you are.
Awesome, great. Hey, Ari, can you speak a bit to the product fit that Stacey was talking about? Because when you're building something as incredibly complicated and difficult and really life-changing, not just for people, but for the people you're actually doing it for, it's got to be really hard. And maybe talk a little bit about that journey and how quickly you found it and some of the challenges you faced.
Sure. So it's really important to stay really close to your users. And before you have a product and you have users, then to stay close to people that have built similar products in some way and can advise. There's an adage in this town that if you go in asking for money, you get advice. And if you go in asking for advice, maybe you get some money. So when you think about the fundraising process, it's really about one person, oftentimes, it seems like it's a group, but it's really one person who's pushing that group to make a decision. Oftentimes, whether they'll admit it or not, those decisions are really emotional, and then they're looking for facts to back up that gut instinct. And it's all about connecting with that person and then really showing. I mean, you're building a relationship, so you're showing them that you're someone that wants to learn, is coachable. So I think getting out there and really understanding what are the KPIs that are most relevant for your business. Not just what are the KPIs, but what should those numbers look like at various stages? And then maybe one of the hardest jobs of the CEO is understanding whose advice to actually listen to, because you'll get a lot of different opinions and they'll all contradict with one another. So it's challenging, but I think when you have users and you have data, then you got to stay close to that data, and then there's the whole qualitative side of things in terms of actually engaging with people and trying to understand how they feel about the product, what things.
It's also how you engage with them, right? Because it's
Sure.
hard. Because a lot of the time your user is like your mom. She just wants to say nice things. It's like, of
Right.
course, you're wonderful. You're the brightest boy in the whole world.
Biased, yeah.
Because they don't want to upset you, right? And because there's not a huge value.
Totally.
So how do you position those questions to get the type of feedback that can make your product improve?
So, we're getting ready to, we're trying to reinvent the personal camera. We think we've built the most personal camera. a wearable camera, I'm wearing it on my wrist here, that people are actually going to use and wear. Right? We've seen Google Glass, we've seen spectacles, but neither one of them got so much adoption. But we think the wrist makes sense, and with the Apple Watch, now there's an app store coming to the Apple Watch, was just announced, and we're going to see the third generation of cellular Apple Watches this fall. Fine. But meanwhile, we're really using this internally, keeping things quiet. So I've got like Stacy, I have a CMO who really helps with the story and is passionate about what we're doing. If I invite users in and then I put them in a room and my CMO and other folks that are on the creative team are going to sit with that user, it's going to turn into a pitch. And then whatever data we get back is not going to be objective. So just this last week, we had a user researcher sitting in a room, in a lab, in the office, just working with random folks from off the street that are familiar with Apple Watch and are relevant in the total addressable market for our product. And that's one thing you can do. But you've got to make sure that you're getting objective, relevant data, and then the way you're interpreting that makes sense given the context that you're in.
Beautiful. Alex, anything to add to that? Like, the great thing for all you folks out here is you have people who have raised hundreds of millions of dollars and are still on the journey. So it's not a reminiscent path of how things were before. It's a today path. So Alex, what are you seeing? Obviously you're going to agree with that because it ties into our whole user questionnaire thing. But talk about maybe some of your personal attributes as well as you've been building.
Well, I think it's interesting because I think Ari's right. One of the challenges are that when you go to a user community that have done something a particular way for their whole life, and you ask them, would you like something different, or could you describe to me what you would like, not knowing what it is that they even envision for the future. We did that early on, and I think it was a huge mistake. Because we went to these users and we said, hey, you guys are our customers. What would you like to see? What could we do to delight you? What would be the thing that would just take it over the top? They described exactly what they had at that moment, almost to the T, even though it sucked.
Instead of a car, they wanted faster horses.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, that's exactly right.
But a pretty fast horse.
Well, it was surprising. I'll give you one weird example of this from a product standpoint. We asked record managers, people who actually do stuff with enterprise things, invoices, receipts, purchase orders, would you guys use this on mobile? Because we wanted it on mobile, because why in the hell would we use it tied to a desk? Every single purchaser, every single decision maker that we asked said, no, we don't want it. We built it anyway because we wanted it. And 30% of our users in the first quarter that we went to market were 100% on mobile. If we took it away, they would riot. But they're the same people who said, I don't want it. I'd never
So you're speaking to such an important point, which I want to bring it back to you, but segue into Stacy as well, which is the vision of the entrepreneur and what we're building at the start. Because it's something that's never existed before. And there's an argument to say that it's not even whole at the beginning. There's an argument to say, actually, we never pivot. That we just start at 10 or 11 or 12% of what the product will look like, and then every yes or no on the journey brings us to 13, 14, 15, 16%. Can you speak a little bit, and I want to start with you, Stacy, if I can, because we're talking 3 companies, you got a pretty high batting average. That vision at the beginning, and then how you bring both investors and customers in. Let's speak to both parties with that vision at the start and kind of how you do that.
Yeah, when I think of ServiceMax and SuccessFactors was a lot easier because we were selling to HR who had used paper-based performance reviews, and we just basically automated it, which was like a dream come true for them, which is why SuccessFactors was so easy and grew so fast because it was like such an obvious, solution. Zinc was a much, much, much harder problem to solve because we knew we had a good vision. We knew that all these, field technicians and what we call deskless workers out there they're all using WhatsApp and they're using iMessage. I mean, I love the question this morning, how many of you didn't use a chat app this weekend? Nobody, right? Everybody communicates that way, except for them at work, they're still using like, oh, maybe I'm supposed to log into some email or some, enterprise system on my phone, or I'm supposed to call in, like just such antiquated ways of communicating. So we knew we could solve a big problem for them. And then they're not going to, I know everyone in this room is probably like, but why wouldn't they use Slack? They won't use Slack. Like to them, Slack is just another complicated enterprise system, and adoption is really low. So we had this struggle of, do we try to sell to them because it's harder to get to them, they're not going to be early adopters, or do we go sell to a buyer within the organization, a head of field service, IT? And we spent a lot of time kind of going back and forth between who is our audience? Is it the end user, or is it a buyer in an organization? Slack was very, very successful selling to users, but this audience is very different than a field service technician. And I think that's why when I go back to, we were trying to just get more salespeople out there, but we hadn't really figured out, we got it, who we need to go sell to. And that was a big part of what took us probably a little longer than, say, ServiceMax and SuccessFactors.
And again, I love the intense focus on the product fit. We're in the last 30 seconds or so. Alex, finish us out. Actually, give us second last, and then Ari, you finish us out.
Okay. So I think one thing that I would want to add to what Stacy said, which is right on the money, is that from a fundraising standpoint, we've always focused on, we have a mantra that's going to last forever. And we have a mission that's very, very directly now. So for Ripcord, and I think it helped fundraising, right? Our mantra was, we want to be the company that takes the world paperless, right? Everybody says the world's going paperless. We couldn't find anybody focused on that. We want to be the company that solves it. That's kind of an insane, audacious mantra that we'll probably never achieve in our lifetime, even though I'd love to. Then we had a mission, and the mission was much more focused on a business problem that we could solve, that we could connect product market fit with today. And I think from a fundraising standpoint, I just wanted to add that tidbit, because mantra is all about vision, and mission is all about what are we doing today. So I think that's important.
Right.
Sorry.
The vision is very powerful. If you look at big companies that lacking innovation or lacking direction, trying to figure out what the next 10 years look like, vision is very powerful. So there's people that can raise tens or hundreds of millions of dollars based on a vision that's well articulated. So I'd say refining that mission statement and the vision and getting there through iterative feedback, talking to smart folks that have experience and perspectives that you don't, will go a long way.
Awesome. So look, I can't think of a better way to finish. Vision equals stories. Stories are what bind us all together as human beings and make us connect, and more importantly, make us feel. Create a great vision, execute the great vision. You won't have a problem finding investors. Thank you very much, panel.
Thank you.